My full name is Umberto Peronini, but Hap was born much later than me. It was a convenient way of working in the US, where the name Humberto was difficult for people to pronounce. So Hap, my initials, was born, and that's how Hap came to be. So welcome to this seminar webinar. We'll be talking about key elements that are affecting us every day, both at a professional and personal level. But for those of you that I haven't had the pleasure to work with, here's a little bit about my background. Born in Argentina, came to the US mid-70s. I went to school here, then did some schooling in Europe as well. But as far as my professional experience, has been in the business-to-business for customer service industry. Currently, I owned a consulting firm with 3 partners, and we specialized in long-term contracts and helping clients retain their clients, sort of protecting the revenue they already have. But before that, I worked for companies such as United Health Serve, Marriott International, Sodexo Group out of France, different roles. And so I am a practitioner, and I joined academia approximately 7-8 years ago when I retired from corporate. The agenda for today is extensive, and so there are 5 key items, but we will stop along the way at least 3 times and then one final at the end. So as questions come up, we can address them right then and there. Just to make sure my audio is coming through loud and clear, would somebody say yes or no from the audience?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. All right, so we'll begin with the first question. Is COVID-19 going to stop globalization? Well, after doing research and reading tons of information, we came to 3 arguments that will defend the hypothesis that COVID-19 is going to stop globalization, that countries will go back to being very protectionism, nationalism, do everything in your country and stop globalization. This argument is based on the fact that there was already a discontent, whether it was in Europe, in the US, Latin America, and elsewhere. Particularly the US in the last 3.5 years begun negotiations, but the way they came to it was sort of a trade war. And countries started to go to a protectionism, nationalism, build walls as the US is building between Mexico and the US. And even England as trying to get away from the European Union. And so in general, the argument is, look, things were already bad and were already tense. It was not a friendly environment. So it was a matter of time, and COVID did it. So that's the first argument. But here comes the reflection that the other side of the coin, the world has been through this crisis before. Recently, Ebola, H1N1 in the 2010-2008 period, SARS in 2003, the Spanish flu at the beginning of last century, and let's not forget the wars that we had. So this argument that the world was already tense and ready to break, it doesn't, according to the opposite side, to the side that believes that it's not going to stop it, they neutralize this argument. Let's look at the second argument. The second argument is, wait a minute, globalization is in part to blame for this pandemic. Because if we didn't travel as much as we did, then we wouldn't have had so much globalization. Well, that argument can also be neutralized, realizing that this isn't the first time that the world goes through this. If you and I think about how we travel and the security points at airports, hotels, major cities, so basically what the world did, we adjusted to the new reality. And so this blame on globalization for the pandemic to spread is just not valid either. And so this is the second argument. It just basically says, look, there'll be a new way of doing things. Now, the last argument is this concept, this notion of this desire to blame someone. And that doesn't work either, simply because it is a new reality. And in the aftermath, countries may also rethink their readiness for how this crisis should be handled. So what our position, our thinking, our reflection and conclusions are is that globalization will persist, and perhaps will be in a different mode, in a different fashion. But globalization is not going to stop. Countries will still need goods and services from other countries. Some states will have natural resources that other countries will require. And what about talent? There are certain trends throughout the world. There are regions that provide talents that others don't. So in reality, the 2020 reality and measures do not present a fatal blow to globalization. But what it does do, because for so many arguments, we have changed the way we live our lives, there is a new phase. And so this isn't sort of the beginning of the end. This is the end of the beginning. This is the end of the beginning of the change. And change is not easy, but it is something that we will need to deal with. But there are ways to look at it. It could be in a positive or a pessimistic way. But the bottom line is that the new phase, it goes beyond the trades of goods. If we think about the digitalization of the world, at this point, the information floating on the digital world is much greater than ever before. And that is the new way of globalization. Concepts, services, good, and the financial and people. And so the concept of the fear that globalization will stop, that the global trade will no longer exist, that the World Trade Organization will cease to exist, is just not valid. We need to recognize as business executives that the way we do our business will not be the same as we did it last year this time. Education has adjusted to it. But let's look at some of the facts and figures provided by the World Trade Organization. And of course, there are two views, the optimistic and the pessimistic. But let me bring this chart up for you. And I'll give you a second to read what's here. The blue is the optimistic. The orange is the pessimistic. The gray year to date is what it is. And then the trend on dotted line, green. I'll give you a second to look at it. Wendy, have we have any new folks that joined us since I started?
Yes. Brian, John, Philip.
Okay, well, welcome to one and all. My name is Umberto Peraniti. Short, I go by HAP, and I welcome you. We are in the first portion of the agenda, where the fear that COVID-19 will paralyze globalization or stop it. We just went through the three arguments, and at the same time, we share with the group the reasons why the arguments are not valid. They're good concerns, but they're not valid. And this chart proves that even though in 2020 Q1, we had the V drop, we can see that the 2020 Q3, there is a recovery already. So we are adjusting the same way that education adjusted, the same way that working remotely adjusted. We will continue to adjust and find a new ground to move on forward. So it's not that it's the end of globalization. There will be a new way of dealing with globalization, much like after 9/11, the whole world changed in terms of airport security, where before you used to walk all the way to the gate, and now you have different perimeters to go through. This is the same, but take a look at the chart when you get to 2020 Q3 and 2021 Q1. So there's three scenarios there. The blue that said, look, we will continue to recover because the vaccine will become available. Many versions of the vaccine will become available. People will understand with the second wave in the northern hemisphere that this is serious. And all the northern hemisphere has done has taken advantage of the summer and the personal protection that we've used. But now that the northern hemisphere is going into the winter, the numbers will continue to uptick, and we will then apply the lessons learned and move forward. And that's why the blue is the way it is. On the other side of the spectrum, the orange is saying, look, this is not going to be, the second wave is going to take us down. And so somewhere in the middle, the reality will gravitate. But the main point from here is that we recognize, the World Trade Organization recognizes the drop, but also is indicating the recovery. And they're showing us three potential recoveries. So this is our first stop. And this is when you, the audience, and I will have a few questions and answers, reflections on what you've seen, your own opinion. So I'm open. This it'll take about 3 to 5 minutes. So not all at once, but go ahead, and I'm listening now. And before you bring the question, just introduce your first name, so if anything, I have that. So please go ahead.
Hi, Prof. This is Ruben here.
Who is this?
Ruben.
Ruben
Here, Prof.
Yeah. Hi, good morning, Ruben.
Yeah, Prof, I know we did share about how the different pandemics that we have faced through across the ages, with Spanish flu and all that, and expect to it. But then again, there's this aspect whereby societies are very inward looking, with Brexit, and then, looking at America and with the sentiments that Trump have drummed out. How do you think that there is any reflection points in history that we could pick up that is going to, I don't think it will stop globalization, but in terms of how it slows down this aspect of it?
Okay, what I'm about to share with everyone is my perspective. Is not that of Rutgers. It may or may not agree with me, but I just wanted to make that clarification. And what I'm about to share with you is my opinion formed on things that I read, and dedication to the topic. Much like every one of you will have a point of view. So if Ruben, back to your question, I think it had to do with what lessons have we learned that we can apply to the future for the recovery?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, it's along the line, whereby we have seen certain societies or environment that decides that that the local environment is not being supportive enough of the people within the environment, and lapping on globalizations for aspects of talents or even cost savings in terms of goods. How can we address that, or is there any reflection points in history that we could tap on?
Yeah, there's two factors here that come to mind. Number one, this was not an economic crash. It's not that the world economy crashed. The world economy crashed as a consequence of the crisis, the health crisis, COVID-19. So the theory would be, once we address that health issue, and once we begin the process of recovery from a health point of view, it is believed that the economic health will come back as well. Our freedom to do things the way we did before will also come back as well, because it was not intrinsic in the economy as it was 2007, 2008. The question that I don't have an answer, and we can defend our point of view, every one of us, is the time. What would the curve look like? What would the recovery curve look like? Would it be the blue one? Would it be the orange? Could it be a red one? So provided that the order of the world and the law and order in the world remains as is, that there isn't a major military conflict anywhere, I believe that the recovery will take anywhere between 3 and 5 years. When we think about hospitality services, airports, restaurants, air travel, ground transportation, dry cleaners. Dry cleaners are in dire need of business. We're not bringing. So for all of that to recover and take a life of its own, in my estimation, it'll be probably 3 to 5, 7 years. Speaking with other colleagues of mine, they say, no, it's going to be more than that. Others say, no, it's going to be right away. So, Ruben, I don't know if I answered your question or if what I shared with you gave you a perspective. I'll give you a chance to come back to me, and then I'll move to someone else.
Yeah. So I was thinking, and I know you mentioned about, like, goods are still moving, and I do know that, the import and export of goods are still moving out. You see planes are still flying, they are chock full with cargoes. We see that happening. But the moving of human beings, the talent aspect and all that, obviously is tough physically, but then we are moving on to, using tools like now using a Zoom call and all that. And I think that it's just about how we could get better with using that, and that is how the new phase of globalization would look like, in my opinion. But how long it'll take, I think, is all up in the air, and it's really about because even I work in the pharma industry, and I can tell you, I'm not so confident the actual date that we can have a vaccines out into the industry.
Good point. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, folks, from the rest of you, anyone else that'd like to share what you've heard, any reactions to what you've heard?
So hi, it's John Bergen. I was in the Singapore course a while back. Very interesting perspective, and I really appreciate these opportunities. I'll just, by the way, I'm calling from Russia. I work in Russia. But
sorry, John.
That's not the point. Don't worry. That's not the point. This, globalization is changing anyway. I think just a different perspective, perhaps, Professor. COVID is accelerating some changes, but the leader of the free world, whether you like his politics or not, he's anti-globalization. Europe is struggling with globalization. Russia has developed massively in the last 8 years towards nationalization, and China is still trying to fund globalization, but is struggling themselves with where to invest to try to prop up their own economy. So sure. You're seeing a trend against at the moment. That I believe was massively accelerated, like so many other things, by the last 7 or 8 months of a different situation.
John, great points. And do you still think that the exchange of goods and services will continue in some degree as we continue to the next decade?
I think goods, yes. Services, less. People, probably even less. I mean, the concept of an expatriate, the concept of migrant labor, and things like this are going to hit massive challenges. I think they'll exist, but on a significantly smaller scale. So globalization will be different.
Yeah, and folks, just to echo what John said, you need to think about corporations that right now are continuing to run business without the great expense of travel, lodging, meals. And so right now, this COVID has put us in a position to rethink the way we go to business. And so I tend to agree with John that it'll take a different shape, and it will go through a period of will evolve, and then eventually will gravitate someplace else. And so now I'd like to move and take a closer look to the industries that, or said a different way, what are the industries that are growing in this period of time? And not to anyone's surprise, technology, e-commerce, healthcare is moving aggressively on telemedicine, higher education, online is becoming the way of doing business. And yes, bankruptcy lawyers is a reality of life. That's where the money is going. And the ones that have been affected the most, as you would also expect, is that retail. In talking with folks in Europe, our partners, the malls, the shopping malls are taking a tremendous blow. Same here in the United States, which was already happening. Now again has been accelerated, as John pointed out. But this is what we were saying just a few minutes ago. The pandemic event pushed this at a faster speed. Now, what you're looking at here is simply a study done by McKinsey, which you can get in line if you want to get more into the detail. But again, it's showing the size of the bubble. It represents the risk and the impact of the business. And of course, the largest is accommodation and food services. Administration support will follow, and so forth. So this is something that if you are looking at a personal level to change industries, if you were already thinking about taking your skills and go someplace else, this is a good time to look at studies like this, to take in account the reality that we are living, and make a informed decision as to what industry you would go to or migrate to if you're looking to make a change. At the same time, if you are in a consulting business, as we are with my partners, this type of information helps us, because if there are industries right now that need to retain their revenue, and that's what we specialized on. Remember, there are four business principles. One, you grow the business, you go and get new clients, basically. Second, retain the clients you have, save cost, reduce cost, or can increase the sales at your current with your current clients. So one of the four fundamentals is what we specialized in, and right now this is helping us see where the need is. And clearly, any one of those three will use our services, and they are the ones using our services. But in terms of a long-term average profit estimation, what we have is that healthcare, these are the 7 best performing industries. healthcare equipment, as we would expect, telecommunications, software, pharmaceutical, semiconductors. This is the industries that right now are flourishing. And on the other spectrum, just take a look at oil at $40+ a barrel. Just about 10 years ago, it was over 100. And countries such as Mexico, Venezuela, and others that depended heavily on the price per barrel, this is just an incredible blow in terms of energy utilities. But again, bank, insurance, transportation, Uber, just reading, they are reducing and shrinking services, as you would expect, because the need is not there. This is part of the recovery that we were speaking about before. But amazingly, one of the things I was talking with Vinod Jain is a PhD who does research, a great professor, international. And he said, one of the studies that I've done, he said, the M&A is the one that has taken the greatest blow, because what you look at it is a 79% drop. And here are, of course, the industries that were affected. And it sort of makes sense that companies are not taking the risk to grow by growing by buying competitors or diversifying, simply because today we are in a mode of understanding how we will react and readjust to the reality. So M&As have virtually come to a stop, with just a little bit of 25% activity in the areas. But interesting, and you can get details of this on the Price Waterhouse website. At the bottom of the screen, right here, we have the link to the report, which is a very valuable piece of information, again, to determine, okay, what do I do? Maybe with this situation, some of us were laid off, were dismissed from employment, and you're looking for something where these are the industries that could help you. So this is another stop where we can chat for a few minutes, react. I'd like to hear your perspective as well. So thank you, Ruben, for coming in earlier. John, I appreciate it. What about the rest of you? What's your reaction? What did you hear on the last couple of slides? What questions of clarifications may you have for me?
I think, Prof, for me, the telemedicine is pretty disruptive.
The what? I'm
Because
sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't hear you.
Telemedicine is pretty disruptive, since normally when you wanted to visit a doctor, you would go to a clinic and then you have to be physically there, wait maybe 1 hour to see the doctor for a 5-minute consultation. So this telemedicine is in a way different, because you get to see the doctor, like you don't have to wait, you're at your home, and you're not really risking yourself physically going to the hospital or the clinic and catching something else. Mm-hmm. But I think that's pretty, it's maybe upcoming in the future.
It is. And as always, the business that is taking a negative impact because of telemedicine are the urgent care centers that became somewhat commonplace in the last 7 to 10 years because they don't have the traffic. At the same time, they do get the traffic virtually, but medical centers are the ones that are also providing that. So there is a little bit of, there's a greater degree of competition, where before the urgent care centers had the ability to see a patient a lot quicker than in a hospital. So right now they're facing a new challenge, at the same time an opportunity. But good comment, Hans. Thank you.
Hi, Prof.
Ravi,
Here.
Yes, who is this?
It's Brian.
Brian.
Same class as Hans, actually.
Yes.
So I can echo that. It's not my exact industry, but I know that is the hot button topic in the healthcare industry for growth already and into the future is telemedicine. The one I'm surprised with is the decline in M&A. I would have thought
Me too.
there was a lot of, I don't know how to say this sensitively, but
Um,
a lot of deals out there, I guess, a lot of struggling companies that might get gobbled up by some of the bigger players who are surviving the storm. So that's a bit of a surprise to me.
Brian, I share the same surprise. When Vinod shared the data with me, my reaction was, no, come on, this is the opportunity. And very very carefully, he pointed out that the 29 to 30% that still is occurring in the M&A is occurring in areas where the industry is growing, whether it's technology or medicine and mergers of major medical centers, because that's where still there is economy activity. The dollar goes from one hand to the other, where the other industries. It's just not happening. As many of you know, I worked for Marriott International for 15 years. Well, right now they closed over, don't quote me on the number, a large number of hotels. So no one is going to be looking to buy the Marriott because they're not in a better position. It's not an industry of growth right now, but very valid. You were with Steris, Brian?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh, okay. You're still with them?
I am, yes.
All right. Well, I'm sure you're very busy.
Yeah, it's pretty busy right now.
Yeah. And do you have the portable? Do they have portable labs or sterilization units that you move from one location to another, or you don't do that in your territory?
In my side, not so much, but I guess the way we're diversified, so if hospitals themselves are slower, then pharma companies are picking up, and we tend to be, it tends to sort of level everything out.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
But overall, I mean, hospitals did take a hit.
mhm.
It's, I mean, the number of elective cases dropped significantly across the world. So it's, yeah, it definitely had an impact and still having an impact in a lot of countries. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, very accurate. Good to hear from you again, Brian.
Yeah,
Same with
thank
you, Hans. I'll give you another minute or two if anybody else cares to come forward.
Hi, Prof. This is Ravi.
Libby, hi.
I did your course about 20 years ago in Singapore. And
Good to hear
I
back.
saw with interest your merger and acquisition slide. And this is actually a follow-up question to the question we had just now.
Mhm.
What do you think is some of this pre-COVID and accelerated because of COVID, or is it only because of COVID? What is your sort of inkling on this?
Yeah.
Because my sense was that the economy sort of worldwide was already on a shaky footing way back in December last year. And COVID only accelerated everything that we were seeing at that time.
Thanks, Ravi. It did. But we need to ask ourselves the question, why would a company acquire another company? And why would a company want to be sold to another company? Because usually we look at M&A from the purchasing side. Let's look at it on the other side. Why would I want to sell my company? Well, let's go to why would I want to buy a company? Well, I want to buy a company because I want to grow my business. I want to be in an attractive business. I want to be able to add to my base business another service or another product. But if the industry is not a growth industry, and right now the ones on the left of the screen they're suffering an incredible decline on demand, then why would I at this point buy a company? And so I believe that 90% of the reason why the M&A stopped with COVID is because of COVID. Because not only these industries right now and for a while will not be attractive, but there is the uncertainty over the whole equation. So the last comment on this, Ravi, and then I'll hear back from you. Once we get the vaccine and we stabilize somewhat, I believe, again, it's my prediction that M&As will ramp up because the ones with money left in the bank will be able to buy those companies that are no longer interested to be in business. Ravi?
Yes, Prof, I can sort of see your logic to that.
Yeah.
However, just wish to add that it is in times of churn when M&A opportunities tend to increase because people see sort of value in the companies which are now 20-30% below what they were.
Yeah, you're right. Look, folks, I was just as surprised when Vinod Jain, we were having a meeting just discussing COVID and industries, and he says, Hap, let me show you this M&A. My eye just opened up. It was beyond my expectations to see that degree. But then when I sat back and I said, okay, yeah, how do I sell my company? How do I sell my company when I'm not generating enough money to cover my expenses? Who's going to want to buy it? How do I position this company to be attractive for somebody to buy it? And then the ones that want to buy it, if they're in that industry, they have suffered incredible decline of cash flow. So I think it is a wait and see situation. But this is something that I think all of you find interesting. Joe Whitehead is a British researcher who wrote a number of books. Over the years, I established a connection with him. I don't have a relationship, just a connection that I have used to ask questions. He has been very willing to connect with me and respond. And so about a month ago, I was reading one of his books, a great book, great writer. And I said, wow, what would Joe write today as far as strategy? How would he position strategy after the hit of COVID-19? So he responded a number of times, but this is an incredible, to me, insightful and common sense approach that makes it very simple to cope with the uncertainty. So because look, what COVID has done is it changed the horizon of the strategy. It created like a staircase where the first horizon is survival. So companies need to shift their strategy, their choices. Remember, strategy is about choice. Their choice is to survive the business and do whatever they need to do to survive. Then the second one is, how do I benefit from this? How do this crisis, how do I make this a win-win for our customers, for our people, for the world? So how do I profit from this? How do I make it better? And then the third horizon, he says, well, now that we've been through the survival and we understand how we need to do business, then how do we transform? And many of you have already indicated that to me. What I like about the way he communicates is as clear, as concise, as succinct. And this is something that we in our consulting firm did intuitively. We didn't think in these terms. We didn't think about three horizons. But the three horizons gives me and my partners, and I'm sure you too, it gives you the stages, stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3, because he said, look, this isn't the first time in the first force. We had the 9/11, we had the 2008 crash, we have Trump being elected to the presidency of the United States. And so the rise of China. So there are other factors that are not maybe as obvious and powerful as COVID-19 has been, but these factors are there and they need to be taken into account as companies put their strategy together. So let me. I don't have a stop here, but I just want to get some feedback on this. What? How do you relate to this 3 horizons? How do you relate to the other forces? What's your opinion? Does it make sense? Does it not?
Yeah,
No,
it's John again, and
Yeah.
I'll sorry. I think it's spot on. I mean, if you look at my business and the businesses I'm familiar with, the first thing we did is find cash, and I'll expand the credit lines, hold on to cash, crunch the payment terms, survive. Just make sure you got enough cash to survive. And how could you do an acquisition when you're in survival mode? If you're the guy who spent the cash instead of saving the cash, well, you kill the company. So that wouldn't be very clever. But then, there's the old Rothschild saying, buy when there's blood in the streets. But, in this case, it was more than blood, or maybe it was a little too deep.
Yes.
So, really, that's still going to happen. But what's also going to happen is instead of buying a going concern, we'll be buying out of bankruptcy for 40% of asset value and getting a real bargain. Yes. Rather than what we would have paid for a going concern and the uncertainty. So I think that Horizon 3 includes a lot of acquisitions out of bankruptcies or limping companies. And there will be a lot of industries that see some significant realignment in the next 18 months.
And to the point that John is making, folks, Vinod Jain indicated that the bankruptcy lawyers is a business that is just growing faster than before. And it goes right to your point, John. Stage 3, as companies get to stage 3 or the 3rd horizon, M&As will pick up. So yes, thank you, John. I think there was one other person that had a reaction to it.
Yeah, Ravi, once again, just a comment on a lighter vein. Maybe the trend worldwide is to become vegetarian. So we will wait for the companies, not necessarily for the blood, but we will sort of wait until there is a little bit more clarity in terms
exactly.
of
Yeah. And so, look, the reason why I reacted so positively to Joe Whitehead's message is because when we are in the middle of a crisis, it's more difficult to see clearly what choice we should make. And Joe, as a researcher and an incredible writer, has this ability to just make it clear for us. And if I was running a large corporation, as I did when I was in corporate, man, this is golden. So I know all of you are busy and what have you, but if you want to read books that Joe writes, they're good. What can I tell you? And that's an unpaid commercial, Joe Whitehead. It's just a good writer, a good researcher, and worth the time to read. So good, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, so the next 2 modules, probably they'll take about 15 minutes each. But first, I want to take a look at why strategies either evolve or die over time. And here we have high and low on the vertical axis and then time on the bottom. And we call this revelation X, and you'll see why that happens in the middle. So if you think of a service company that just signed up with a large client, usually that client had a lot of issues, had a lot of problems to solve because they went out to the market and get a specialist. So their problems are high. At the same time, the service provider, us, our fees are low. Why? Because we just came out of an RFP, a request for proposal, rather, or we were able to get this client, but the price was competitive. Now, I'll ask anyone, when you take over a contract, a job, and you have problems, what do you do with those problems over time? John, what do you do with the problems over time?
Solve them.
Yeah, you do. You do. It's simple. Now, Ruben is good with cash and making money. So, hey, Ruben, what do you do? What are you going to do with your fees over time? Your fees are low. Yeah, you're going to increase them. Yeah,
I'm gonna get better.
Yeah, I know. I know you. I know you, Ruben. But now, look, everybody, this is a reality. And before I go any further, no one can really predict the future. But here's why I have the audacity to say this will happen to you, this will happen to your company for one reason. Because if you don't fix the problems, you will be fired. And if you don't increase your fees to a profitable level over time, then you're not going to stay in business. You see, this is why this Revelation X there's no way out. It's going to happen. Now, if you just throw a couple of parameters in terms of the years, and you look at this, your customer in year 2, still getting a good deal, you solved all the problems, your fees are still low, and things are okay. But what if that client goes away and you get a new client, or you get a new company, you get a second to market, you get a substitute in the industry? Your client is going to look back or forward. It's going to look forward. And what is that client going to see in year 3? A gap. So you see, what worked for you and me, and this is why strategies either evolve or die. There's no in between. At the beginning, what worked then is no longer working in year 3. So I go back to Ruben. I'll pick on you, Ruben. So Ruben, what would you do here to close that gap? There are only 2 lines.
Create more problems.
Okay, everybody. Yeah, Ruben has a good sense of humor, sometimes a little salty, but
I think for this is about, we got to find the new problems that we need to solve, and right. There'll be new problems, right?
And you need to understand your client's organization. You need to understand their competition, their field, to be able to say, look, this is what we can do. If you're interested, this is not about selling. This is about retaining the revenue that you are already getting by solving clients' problems, because as you do that, you shrink the gap. And that new CEO that is considering a replacement, a substitute for what you do, whether it's service or a product, whether it's service or a product, they'll look at this and say, they're still charging a lot of money, but it's worth it. It's worth it. And this is why strategies cannot be a document that is done once a year and you put it away on a shelf to collect dust. They need to be alive. They need to be constant. And incidentally, folks, you as a service provider to your company, you're in the same boat. And if you don't think I'm right, think about the good people that you've seen prior to COVID-19. Very valuable, very knowledgeable, but they reached the plateau. they couldn't give any more to the company. And then because they did not renew themselves, they did not evolve with time. So that's why this is something that is one or the other. There's no in between. And finally, remember, change is inevitable. The thing that is optional is the progress. So now I'm going to move into, this is going to take a little energy, and so we need to power it up a little bit here, as my great friend and mentor, Farouk Langdana, would say, power up, because I want to go through these 5 stages. Up on the top, you see research, analysis, choice, alignment, and results. All right, there's 5 components. And so we begin with an organization. When you're going to put a strategic plan together, the elements that are vital are factors that are external and internal. Now, if we were in person, we'll put this together, we'll have a conversation, but in interest of time, I'll share with you the external factors that are impacting your organization's strategy. Everything from government to exogenous shocks such as COVID-19, everything in between. And then you have the industry. It's the same degree of intensity. But on the other side, you have the internal factors. How old is this company? Are the owners looking to sell because they made enough money and they're not interested in dealing with the business anymore? They want to enjoy the money and they want to sell it. How is the talent management in our company? Is our company smart in terms of risk management? Financially, is it strong? And what about R&D? I mean, these are the elements that you and I will analyze putting together our plan. Now, going back to Joe Whitehead from England, he's saying, look, the different horizons may change the way in which you go about setting the strategy, but the elements, the external factors, internal, the market trends, that's not going to change because everything is changing at the same time. Now, when you do the research, and incidentally, this is the research state. This is when you rake in all the information that you need in order to then analyze it. So you analyze this information and you start with your own company as it relates to your internal and external conditions. And if you're running a multi-divisional company, well, you need to get alignment between the division on the green and the corporate strategic map on the right side of the screen. This is just for illustration purposes, but just think about it. After you've done all the research, you'll come up with stuff, data, and the strategic initiatives internal in the company is a point of analysis. And this is one, but you also need to analyze your clients. So current clients and future clients. So in this dimension, each of the companies that you represent will determine who the right clients are and what the right terms and conditions are. So you can rank them in any way you want. This is just another bubble chart where the clients that end up on the upper right corner are the clients that you want to build partnerships with. You just don't want to be a vendor. You don't want to be a manufacturer. You don't want to be just a distributor. These are the clients that, because there is alignment, there's chemistry and other factors. And on the bottom left, those are the clients that you want to wait for the future and see how they evolve. So when you have your business development planning, you go to the upper right corner of the quadrant. This is the client selection criteria. But what about the competition? The competition needs to be part of your strategy analysis. So when you did the research back then, if you remember on the bottom left, it was market trends. Well, this is when it comes into play and say, okay, how do I find things about my competition in a legal and ethical way? Well, these are some of the ways. Whether it's an annual report, whether they're vendors, former employees, former clients, these are all valid ways for you to conduct the analysis. Their own website, their Salesforce, financially, if they're public, And so this is, so you have analyzed the data that came about your company, internal and external. You've analyzed the clients you want to do business with. You have a list of potential strategic choices, and then you come to the clients and you do the analysis there. I have about maybe 3 or 4 more slides and then we'll stop. But choices. So you research, you analyze, you're in choices. Well, you come up with a list, because by now you're in a position to say, these are the ones that, to me, and this is just for illustration purposes, but these are the 10 top choices that we as an organization should follow. But we don't have resources to go after all of them. So then you need to ask yourself the question, what's important? And then what's urgent? So you take what's important, but then you say, okay, what is the priority here? And you prioritize them based upon your resources. And you come up with 5. And then you need to do is still choices. And this is going to get a little dizzy and busy. But look, these are the decisions that you need to make to implement your strategic initiative. Would I do it in-house? Would I go outside? And this is just for illustration purposes. Of course, the red, we're not going to do. The green, we are. And the orange, still debating. But this is how you formulate a plan. This is how you do it. And so this is the choice stage. And then, of course, you need to communicate your choices to your team, to perhaps investors. And something like this will help you make your point, because when we look at this without me explaining anything, your eyes go to the left, the red bubbles with the white words, because that's the most disruptive force within your strategic plan. And the rest, yes, there are other items, but this is how you communicate. This is how you get a clear picture of where you're going. Now, it doesn't end there, because if you make the right choices, but you don't align your resources and you don't put responsibilities and you're not clear on what you expect from your team, then nothing is going to get done. So you put together something to reach alignment. And the alignment goes into then results. Well, then who is going to do what? And it needs to be personal. This is when you allocate resources. And if you're the vice president of facilities management for this company, well, then you'll have some district managers that are dedicated to you, but then you have the support services to support that initiative as well. And this is the point that we have a conversation. I know I shared quite a bit with you, but I'm more than willing to go back and cover anything. This is just before we get into putting the plan together. So let me hear what clarifications, what points of interest you'd like for me to cover before we put the plan together. For the people on the line that have not taken the course, I'd like to hear from 1 or 2 of you, if you would have a comment or a reaction to it. Clarification, any? Please unmute your microphone and fire away. Any reactions, any clarifications to it? Too much at once? Okay, to the rest of you, what reaction, what questions may you have? Anyone? All right, let's move on and put this thing together. At this point, and this is the last portion, we have about 7 slides, and you'll have this available later. But right now, we've seen the impact of COVID. We've seen the reason why strategies die or not. But now is the time to get clearly on what a strategy is about. So a strategy is about choices. Choices in relation to the results we want to accomplish. But it starts with the research, because just as you make decisions, you need to find things out, whether it is a vacation that you're planning, or purchasing a house, a vehicle, or changing employer organizations, or studying a new business. You do a research. But when you do a research, you come back with a lot of information. And that's when you need to analyze this information. Then you make your choices and you look for that alignment. So in about 5 minutes or so, I will put together for you and review this schematic that we've done. So we talked about the research. So we have external factors and internal factors, as well as the firm's internal elements. And that's what you need in terms of assessing the forces that will come to you. Yes, here you can apply the 5 forces of Michael Porter, applies for the industry, but when it comes to industry and trends, that's one that you can use, or many others. Then you get into the analysis, and you have two. You have a corporate level of strategy and the strategic business unit initiatives. So on the one hand, on the top, you get the corporate strategy and the direction the organization wants to go, and then how you will develop your own strategy to reach the objectives and the results that the corporation wants to reach. Now, once we've done that, we need to determine the choices. Now, in business, we need to measure the choices and the degree of value that we generate. And there's 2 types of value that you can generate. One is horizontal and the other is vertical. So we're not going to read through this. I don't expect you to read through it at all. But these are ways that you as a division can create value for your business. Whether it's cross-selling, you have a client with one product and you can add another product, whether it's a vertical integration, whether it's new business development. But test your choices against these values, because if your choices do not generate a vertical or horizontal value, then you will take away value from the company. Again, there's no in-between stage here. So this value added situation or creation of value will help you determine what are the best choices for your company in terms of a strategic direction. Let's move on to alignment, because without alignment, then nothing will happen. So you need the vision, you need to allocate the resources, you need to develop action timetables and responsibilities. And clearly, please define what success should look like. And this is, you don't have to be a CEO to use this. If you have a team, if direct or indirect reports, and you're embarking in a strategic direction, please tell me what success should look like, so I know I made it when I see it, because that's how you generate accountability. There's no other way. When you have alignment, you do create accountability, and with that, you'll get to the results. There is no in between here either. So we come into the end of my segment, and we will open it up for questions. But look, if you put in a linear process, you start with the purpose of your business. What business am I in? You do your research, the analysis, the choices, you reach alignment, and you go for results. But over time, you want to make sure that the direction you are going is consistent with your strategic plan. So measure the gap between your plan and your results, because only when you do that, you'll establish if the course you are in is the course you want to keep, or if you need to course correction. And that's, in essence, the one picture for the strategic plan at a very macro level. So with that, I'd like to stop and see what reactions, what comments you may have. I have a few other sources of information for you as far as strategy, but let me stop right there and get from you feedback on the material that we've seen. So your time, your turn. Ask yourself, is this something I can use? Is this something that has clarified the concept of a strategy for me? Is anybody there? Am I by myself here? I'm not sure. I can't see who is here, who is not.
Hi, Prof. Ruben here. I mean, it's clear to me. I mean, in all honesty, it's a very good refresher that what you went through for me. I mean, it's been 4 years since I took the course, right? I think it's something that's much needed.
I hope you can apply some of this. You don't need to be a CEO to behave like one, because you are your own CEO. So thank you.
It's really a good refresher, in my opinion, for me, you know.
Thank you. Well, here are some additional resources for you, for all of you. On the online, there are about 6 different sites that we found helpful and useful. Books, there's just a few that have good material for you. And then strategic frameworks, if you're interested in other more specific frameworks, then you have these 4 that I listed there for you at the bottom. And with that, just final thoughts, comments, questions, reactions. This brings me to the end of the formal portion of the webinar. Now I'll turn it over to you for your final questions, reactions, comments, clarifications.
Thank you, Prof. It was very helpful and a nice reminder. The second half is a nice, a nice review from a few months back. So this was very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Good luck with good luck in your projects. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, with that, Wendy, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
It seems that we don't have any more questions, but I'll take one more. I don't know how many participants we have, but as many as we are, if you have any questions, this is a good time. As a follow-up, you can reach Wendy for any follow-up questions as it relates to the material here or anything else that may come across in terms of a strategy. I'll be glad and more than happy to reconnect with you. Wendy, anything else from you?
No, thank you, Prof. So we will be sharing the slides and the recording with with the attendees. So if you have any questions for us, then you can just feel free to write to me and I'll pass it over to Hub.
Very well. To the
Yeah.
rest of you, I thank you for joining this webinar. I hope you found it helpful, and I wish you well in these difficult times. Be well, be safe, and until next time, thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Prof. Thank you,
Bye,
Wendy.
Prof. Take care, Prof.
My pleasure. Be
Thanks,
well.
Prof.
Thank you.
It was good. Thank you.
Thank you.